In the previous section, we learned about the various EDI transactions and what their purpose was. In this section, we will learn how the practice management system, or otherwise known as PMS, interacts with the outside entities such as payers and clearinghouses. Dental offices have to interact with dozens, if not hundreds, of payers. Large dental group practices routinely do business with hundreds of payers on a daily basis. For each payer that the provider sends claims to, an individual connection will have to be made. That's a lot of connections when only a few claims are sent from a provider to a payer on any given day. Talk about time consuming. Fortunately, there is an easier way to send claims to all of those payers without having to maintain hundreds of connections. Entities called clearinghouses act as go-betweens for the providers and payers. The simplest way to think of a clearinghouse is to think of it like a post office. Insurance claims come in from lots of different individual dentists and then are sorted and bundled together for delivery to different payers. There are 4 basic ways to deliver claims. Claims are printed to paper and delivered via the U.S. mail. Claims are delivered to another third party who in turn delivers the claim to the payer. Claims are allowed to collect into a group at a clearinghouse and are delivered as a single transaction directly to the payer, usually once a day. This is typically called batch delivery. Claims are delivered as a transaction directly to the payer immediately as the claim arrives at the clearinghouse. This is typically called a real-time 837D transaction. It is important to understand that some of the electronic transactions have non-electronic counterparts. An insurance claim can be sent to a payer by an 837D electronic transaction, or the claim can be sent on paper through a non-electronic method such as the United States mail. Similarly, the information from the payers to the dentist can also be sent electronically as transactions or on paper. Converting the transfer of information from paper/manual methods to electronic methods is a primary goal of the clearinghouses. Now let's review the typical EDI transaction flow between a provider's PMS and a clearinghouse. First, the patient presents her insurance card. Their pertinent information is entered into the PMS, including the subscriber information. The PMS sends a real-time 270 transaction to the clearinghouse. The clearinghouse forwards the request to the relevant payer, and the payer provides a 271 response. The clearinghouse returns the response to the appropriate provider's PMS. The PMS parses the 271 response and makes a determination of eligibility based upon the response. This process usually takes about 20 seconds. Assuming the 270/271 transaction showed eligible coverage and acceptable service limits, the next step is to do the actual work on the patient. As the work is done, the details of the work being performed are entered into the PMS. At the end of the day, the work is reviewed in the PMS and is turned into relevant charges, which will ultimately become chargeable line items. All of those line items are generated into an 837D claim file, at which point the PMS sends the 837D file to the clearinghouse. After the clearinghouse accepts the 837D file, it provides a 999 accept/reject file to the PMS. This file lets the PMS know that the file was accepted, or if there were errors or rejections. Usually at this point, if there were errors or rejections, they were pretty serious errors, such as X12 syntax errors. Once the clearinghouse processes an 837D file, it sends to the PMS a 277CA, which is an unsolicited claims status file. This notifies the PMS that the claims were accepted or rejected and then the accepted claims were forwarded on to the relevant payer. Typically, a second 277CA file is provided to the PMS, notifying the dentist that the payer acknowledged receipt of the claims. It also tells the PMS whether each claim has been accepted or rejected. After a couple of weeks or so, the payer adjudicates the claims and does two things. The first thing is to generate an electronic funds transfer, otherwise known as an EFT, in order to send the provider the payment for the claims. In doing so, they will receive a tracking number from their financial institution. That tracking number will be put into the 835 electronic remittance advice, otherwise known as ERA, along with all of the payment and denial information for the previously sent claims. The payer sends that 835 file to the clearinghouse. The clearinghouse aggregates all of the 835s destined for the provider from all of the different payers and makes one big 835 file containing all of the payments. The PMS then imports the 835 file and posts the payments to the relevant patient accounts.